Victor Gunnarsson knew how to chat up the ladies in bars. He'd charmed plenty of them with an American-Swedish accent he'd perfected since fleeing from his native country, Sweden, leaving a notorious past behind him. He often told women varying stories. For example, he was an FBI agent or a film director. Gunnarsson had used the time away from his reputation in Sweden to reinvent himself, and was seemingly living his best life when he met Kay Whedon, a teacher in Salisbury, North Carolina. On December 3, 1993, Kay Whedon and Victor Gunnarsson had dinner at a local restaurant, then returned to her home. About 11 p.m., Kay heard a car slowing down in front of her house. As she went to the window, the car quickly drove away. She saw the driver and immediately became angry, then really frightened. A week later, a shocking crime happened that left the small community perplexed and outraged. Catherine Miller, a 77-year-old resident of Salisbury, had been cooking in her apartment when she was shot to death. To investigators, it appeared Ms. Miller must have known her killer because there were no signs of forced entry. January 7, 1990, a North Carolina Department of Transportation employee came across a dead man about 300 feet from a ramp to the Blue Ridge Parkway in Watauga County, North Carolina. The man was naked except for a watch and a ring. 2 gunshot wounds to the head would later be determined as the cause of death by the chief medical examiner. A photo in a missing persons database identified the dead man as 40-year-old Victor Gunnarsson, a Swedish dissident who'd settled in Salisbury, North Carolina. Fingerprints from Interpol confirmed his identity. Investigators learned Gunnarsson had a history in Stockholm as a far-right political activist and was suspected of being a perpetrator in the assassination of Sweden's Prime Minister Olof Palme in 1986. They wondered if Gunnarsson's murder was tied to that case. This initial speculation was quickly expelled after communications between US and Swedish officials. Kay Whedon contacted the police when she heard about Victor on the news. She told them that she hadn't heard from him since December 3rd when he'd taken her out to dinner. She added a troubling concern to the investigators. Recently, she'd ended a relationship with a former boyfriend, a retired Salisbury police officer named L.C. Underwood. He had become furious and vindictive when she wouldn't take him back. He'd started stalking, spying on, and harassing her. After their relationship ended, he would follow her while she was on dates. In late November 1993, she had received several anonymous threatening letters she was sure L.C. had written. One letter was most frightening. It stated that a .22 caliber bullet had been fired into her house. She went on to tell the officers that on December 6th, L.C. Underwood confronted her while she ate at a restaurant with her mother, Catherine Miller. He told Kay that her mother had ruined their relationship and that he wished something would happen to her so that Kay would know how he felt. He had become so angry, he dumped a glass of iced tea in her lap before leaving the restaurant. 3 days later, her mother, Catherine Miller, was found shot dead in her apartment. Kay was fearful that L.C. Underwood might be responsible for Victor Gunnarsson's death, and more shockingly, her mother's death as well. Lamont Claxton Underwood was born September 10, 1951, in Watauga County, North Carolina. He had worked in law enforcement for 19.5 years, first in Wilkesboro, North Carolina, and a few other agencies, before being employed as a deputy sheriff in Lincoln County and as a policeman at Salisbury High School. After suspicion fell on him for the murders of Victor Gunnarsson and Catherine Miller, in January 1994, police would launch a 4-year investigation into the murders, with L.C. Underwood being the prime suspect. The case was complicated from the start because it involved 2 different jurisdictions, Rowan and Watauga counties, but it was a Watauga County, North Carolina grand jury that indicted Underwood on January 30th, 1996 for the first-degree kidnapping and first-degree murder of Victor Gunnarsson. The state did not seek an indictment at that time for Catherine Miller's murder. Underwood pled not guilty to both charges and proceeded to a jury trial.
The state's theory of the crime was partially revealed during its opening statement. L.C. Underwood, a former veteran law enforcement officer, was a jealous, jilted lover who killed Victor Gunnarsson because he saw him as a romantic rival. More specifically, the state theorizes that Underwood had refused to accept his former girlfriend Kay Whedon's decision to break off the romantic relationship, that he stalked, harassed, and spied on her. When Underwood learned Whedon was dating Victor Gunnarsson, he kidnapped him from his home in Rowan County, took him to a secluded area along the Blue Ridge Parkway in Watauga County, where he callously ended Gunnarsson's life with 2 gunshots to the head. Still enraged, a few days later, he drove to Catherine Miller's home. When she let him in and turned her back, he shot and killed her. L.C. Underwood believed Kay Whedon would be so distraught because of the havoc in her life, she would rush back into his arms for consolation. In fact, ladies and gentlemen, the state's case remains uncontradicted. In truth, Victor Gunnarsson and Catherine Miller died at the hands of L.C. Underwood, a man overcome by a raging jealousy, an obsessive jealousy that drove him to murder.
While serving as deputy sheriff in Lincoln County, North Carolina, L.C. Underwood was issued a Colt .38 revolver. Despite his separation from that position, inventory records showed the actual weapon was never located. Several witnesses testified to having seen Underwood in possession of a .38 caliber weapon just prior to the December murders. On February 1, 1994, Watauga and Rowan County authorities searched L.C. Underwood's home and seized more than 50 items, including a .22 caliber revolver, a .22 caliber rifle, and 2 .22 caliber gun cleaning kits, but no .38 caliber pistol. Shortly after Victor Gunnarsson's murder on December 3, 1993, Underwood thoroughly cleaned his 1979 Monte Carlo at a car wash. He also had the trunk carpet shampooed and later painted the trunk's interior. When police searched the car on February 1st, they noticed scratches inside the trunk compartment and a mark that resembled a footprint on the underside of the trunk lid. They removed the trunk mat from the car for testing. Despite Underwood's thorough cleaning, Special Agent Troy Hamlin of the North Carolina Bureau of Investigation, an evidence expert, found 17 head hairs embedded in the trunk mat. Agent Hamlin conducted microscopic examinations and comparison of the hairs found in L.C. Underwood's trunk mat and known hair samples of Victor Gunnarsson. He testified that by mitochondrial DNA analysis, the hairs from the trunk mat matched those of Gunnarsson. At the crime scene, police had found a long piece of electrical tape with a bullet hole, blood drops, and human hair. During the search of Underwood's immaculately clean house, a sharp-eyed officer noticed that behind a clothes dryer there was some electrical tape similar to the type used to gag Gunnarsson. Troy Hamlin studied and compared the characteristics of the 2 samples of electrical tape.
The composition was also compared, which were inorganic and organic characteristics. All of these were consistent with one another, and therefore those 2 items of evidence could have originated from the same roll of tape.
A typewriter ribbon also found in Underwood's house revealed the same language used in anonymous threatening notes that Kay Whedon had received leading up to the murders. An examination of the typewriters at the school, where Underwood had worked as a policeman, revealed that the same typewriter ribbon had been used to type Kay Whedon's address on a letter that had been sent to her. Medical experts determined that Victor Gunnarsson had been dead for weeks when his body was discovered. He'd eaten potatoes with his meal when he had dinner with Kay Whedon on December 3rd. The medical examiner found small traces of potato skins in his stomach, which meant Victor Gunnarsson had received the fatal gunshot wounds and died within 4 to 5 hours after eating.
Friday, December 3rd, 1993. The night of the murder, L.C. Underwood drove by Kay Whedon's house with his date Shirley Scott. According to Scott, a car was parked at Kay's residence. Underwood told her he was doing a favor for a friend when he wrote down the license plate number. They returned to Underwood's house, and at approximately 11:30 p.m., Underwood called a friend in law enforcement and gave him the license plate number. Shortly after, he received a call back saying the license plate number was registered to a vehicle for Victor Gunnarsson, either that night or early the next morning. Underwood abducted Victor Gunnarsson at gunpoint from his apartment in Rowan County, drove him 90-plus miles to Deep Gap along the Blue Ridge Parkway, then took him to a secluded area where he shot and killed him. A former police officer, Underwood was aware of DNA evidence, so he either forced Gunnarsson to disrobe or undressed him after killing him to destroy evidence.
In the cross-examination of the state's witnesses, the defense pointed out the facts. The weapons used to murder Gunnarsson and Miller were never recovered. The bullets that killed Catherine Miller could have been fired from a .357 caliber gun. In their opening statement, however, the defense conceded that L.C. Underwood had been in a stormy relationship with Kay Whedon and that he was hurt about the breakup and wanted to rekindle their relationship. During the years leading up to the trial, law enforcement officers conducted numerous interviews with individuals who could potentially cast doubt on Underwood's guilt. Despite the mountain of evidence that the state had presented, Underwood's defense promised to provide evidence of alternative suspects for both murders. A woman by the name of Heather Shelton was interviewed by an SBI agent on April 11, 1995. She told the investigator that shortly before Victor Gunnarsson's murder, her husband Brandon Shelton had found out that she and Gunnarsson were having an affair and had threatened to kill them. She stated further that after Victor's murder, her husband told her she would never have sex with Gunnarsson again because he and his friend had killed him. She believed him because he had kept newspaper articles about Victor Gunnarsson's murder. An agent followed up her story with an acquaintance of Brandon Shelton, Robbie Smith, who supposedly heard Shelton confess to murdering Victor Gunnarsson. Allegedly, Shelton had told Smith that he and a friend had killed Gunnarsson because Shelton had caught Victor and his wife at their home following a sexual encounter. Brandon Shelton had confessed in his presence to going to Victor Gunnarsson's apartment on December 3, 1993, with a .22 and a .38 caliber pistol. When investigators interviewed Brandon Shelton, he admitted to being jealous over his wife, and he was furious after she admitted having an affair with Gunnarsson. Yes, he had threatened to kill the man, and yes, he kept newspaper clippings on the case. He was familiar with the Blue Ridge Parkway area, where Gunnarsson's body was found, and he had last seen Victor Gunnarsson on the date of his murder. Brandon Shelton stopped the interview. He wanted to talk to an attorney before answering any other questions. The defense proffered two other witnesses who could possibly shed more doubt on Underwood's guilt. Both Rowan County authorities and agents from the State Bureau of Investigations had interviewed Shannon Tedders, a homeowner who lived adjacent to the Watauga County lot where Victor Gunnarsson's body was found, and Terry Osborne, a Rowan County resident who had seen someone outside of Catherine Miller's house at the time of her murder. Shannon Tedders told authorities that in the hours after Gunnarsson was believed to have been murdered and his body dumped, she got a good look at a man who was coming from the area where the body was later found. Tedders said she had never seen anyone come from that area before that date. Police used her description of the man to compel L.C. Underwood to appear in a lineup. She couldn't pick L.C. Underwood out of the lineup with 6 other men. She had not seen any of them before. She told her interviewer that one of the investigators expressed disappointment that she had not identified L.C. Underwood. Tedders reported that when she saw L.C. Underwood's picture in the newspaper, she was sure that he was not the man she had seen on the morning in question. Terry Osborne, who subsequently was elected as the county clerk of court, said the composite sketch of the individual he'd observed leaving the area of Catherine Miller's home around the time she was believed to have been murdered didn't look like L.C. Underwood. Osborne told the SBI agents that one of the officers who interviewed him was upset about him having identified someone other than L.C. Underwood and stated that it didn't matter because he was going to put the murder on L.C. Underwood. The defense rested without calling any of those witnesses to the stand. As a final resort, they had tried to play the Olof Palme card. His lawyer had even trotted out a witness who claimed a federal inmate told him that the Russian government had killed Gunnison to deflect attention from Palm's real assassin. During the state's closing argument, one of the prosecutors, over the defense's objections, told the jury,
Ladies and gentlemen, approximately 3 weeks ago, defense counsel stood in front of you making an opening statement. He told you at that time that L.C. Underwood intended to show through his evidence there was an eyewitness who saw someone coming from the woods in Deep Gap at a time approximating the murder of Victor Gunnison. He told you at that time that L.C. Underwood would show you a confession from someone else to this terrible crime. He told you at that time that he would show you that a witness, the clerk of court I believe, saw someone around Catherine Miller's home at the time she was murdered. Where, ladies and gentlemen, are those witnesses? Where are those people who will sit here in this chair in front of this microphone and tell you those things that Underwood's attorney said they would tell you?
Lamont Claxton Underwood was convicted of first-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping of Victor Gunnison in the Superior Court of Watauga County, North Carolina. He was sentenced to a term of life imprisonment on the first-degree murder conviction and a consecutive sentence of 40 years on the first-degree kidnapping conviction. Authorities never tried Underwood for the murder of Catherine Miller because he already had little chance of getting out of prison on 2 feet, but mostly because Kay Whedon had suffered through enough court proceedings. L.C. Underwood made several attempts to appeal his case, but the U.S. Court of Appeals upheld his conviction in a final appeal dated January 2011. L.C. Underwood died in a hospital on December 23, 2018, while serving his sentence at Central Prison in Raleigh. He was 67.
If you enjoyed this true crime video, please subscribe, like, and share. Thanks for watching.